I am so excited to bring you today's conversation. Today's conversation is with Simon Doble, and Simon is the founder and global CEO of SolarBuddy, which is a social impact organization gifting or on a mission to gift 6 million solar lights to children living in energy poverty globally. Now, I don't know about you, but energy poverty was something I'd never heard of until meeting Simon a couple of years ago. Simon's also CEO of Barefoot Citizens Consulting, committed to creating, building, and investing in socially responsible businesses. Now, his official bio would tell us that he is driven by passion, dedication, and empathy. And what I love about this conversation is you are going to feel that, hear that, sense that every step of the way. In this conversation, which you can tell that I thoroughly enjoyed, Simon's actually going to share with us quite openly that moment in time where he realized that life can flip on a coin. He realized that he had to break away from the shadows and the shackles of the past, and he talks about exactly how he navigated a pathway to being completely aware of who he is, his purpose in the world, and becoming really comfortable in his own skin. It's an entertaining, educational, and insightful conversation, and I can't wait to share it with you. Shall we start? So welcome, Simon, to Since 1972. It's great to have you online this morning.
Thanks, Jacqueline. It's awesome to be here. Thanks very much.
So we're in a little bit of a crazy, topsy-turvy world at the moment. Where in the world are you actually now?
I'm very fortunate to say I'm currently in Tenerife in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia.
Beautiful.
Just come out of lockdown, but a short lockdown. So I think we're in a lucky spot.
Yeah, we're definitely feeling quite fortunate in this part of the world right now, aren't we? Yeah. So, Simon, I've got to know you a little bit through a couple of different conversations over the last few years. But just for our audience, can I get you just to take a few minutes and share with us how you've got to where you've got and just your career and business overview? Simon, in a nutshell.
So I run an international children's charity called SolarBuddy, amongst other things. I run a few social enterprises as well. I ended up here through various ways, various paths, got me to where I am now, but ultimately self-development and learning and understanding who I am as a human being has led me to where I am now. And it's not necessarily about how much money you make. It's certainly not about that. It's about what good you can do for others in the world around you. And that's a driving force for me. So all I do is basically create chaos for my team and try and innovate as much as I can and hope they pick up the mess and run with it quite often.
So a true social entrepreneur then, creating messes from the front.
Yeah.
So you are, the way most of the world is getting to know you is through SolarBuddy and the drive to end energy poverty, which is something I've really become quite a fan of myself. What was the actual catalyst that took you on the journey to move in that direction and to ignite something like SolarBuddy?
Twofold, really. One, I went through my own very dark period through marriage separation and not seeing my children and stuff, and that really opened my eyes to how life can be flipped on a coin and your direction changes it. And that taught me a little bit about myself, but it also widened my lens on how fortunate I had been up to that point and what privileged position I was in, even though I was in a pretty dire state. What privileged position I was in to actually be able to find my own purpose whilst helping others. And that coincided with ultimately reading an article in Time magazine that ultimately formed the direction I now work in and have done for the last 10 years. And that was titled Energy Poverty, the World's Worst Form of Poverty, and yet no one knows anything about it. And I've devoted my life since to ultimately turning on the lights for children around the world. So in some way, I'm hopefully leaving a legacy for my children and whatever.
Yeah. And that article with Time magazine actually sums it up, because until the first time we were introduced, I'd never actually heard of it as a concept. And now it feels like something that I simply can't ignore.
Very.
It's something we take for granted. So when you first decided, or I think having read the publicly available version of your story, it kind of unfolded in all these little steps. But what was it that made you believe that you could make a difference? Was there any particular catalyst or anything that happened that you went, actually, I can make a difference and this is how I can do it?
So I think I was searching for myself. I was definitely trying to work a way to actually survive and work my way through some of the things I was going through, which once you grab hold of that, it's quite a powerful force. And
yes,
and that helped gather momentum. But I think also I'm that historical innovator that never found the purpose-driven innovation. I think, I'd invent things, create things, design things, and generally just searching for my own purpose and direction. And all these things are amazing, and they serve the purpose, but there wasn't a deep purpose to what I was doing. And when I discovered energy poverty and my the confronting sort of motion I found myself in, that I didn't know anything about energy poverty, even though I'd been around the world and lived in it essentially. That was a pivotal moment for me, that I felt I could shift my innovative thinking and design sort of elements to try and solve something as big as that.
Yeah. So the first time you took the concept of SolarBuddy, and we will unpack that a little bit later, but, essentially SolarBuddy is little solar-powered lights for children to use. The first time that you saw adults understand how powerful this was, can you take me to that moment? The first time you presented it and people just went, wow, that aha moment really landed for them.
That's quite an interesting question, actually. We were talking about this recently. We do a lot of events, and obviously prior to COVID, we did a lot of events where we'd gather adults from the workplace in associations and stuff. And we do our presentation on stage about what energy poverty is and where SolarBuddy fits in, and then everyone would make a little line. And we were recently talking about how that started, and we did our first one in New Zealand. And I didn't get to present because I wasn't quite skilled enough at that point, or brave enough, I think is better. And people came out of the conference and hung out with us and made these lights. And the interactions that we had with them was quite profound, really. They we talk in SolarBuddy about the emotional investment that people go on when they learn about what we do, and that wow factor of like, oh my God, I didn't know about that. And then that willingness to try and be involved to do something about it because it's so easily solvable. And that's what happened in the very first event. And I was like, okay, these people are going on the same experience that I went on when I discovered energy poverty via Time magazine. And then it sort of scaled from there. And the first presentation I did on stage, when I built up a little bit of courage and pushed myself out into the unknown and presented to 400 odd people, the momentum grew from there. And the aha moment of everyone in the audience was like, almost guilt that they didn't know, and then a willingness to embrace and be a part of it. And it's sort of gone from there, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned there before you weren't quite brave enough, that presentation in New Zealand, rather than not quite skilled. And one of the mantras I used to live by was, or questions was, what would happen if we were brave enough to be just a little bit more ambitious? And I think it's something that we should ask ourselves more frequently. So what took you from being not quite brave enough to get on that stage and do it yourself?
Exposure, I think. Exposure to the circumstances and the environment of what conferences and in those sorts of events are like. During my previous career, I'd never really been involved in that sort of world, in those sorts of environments. So going into, and I'm a natural, I think they call me an extroverted introvert or something like that.
Yeah.
So going into those environments where there's hundreds of people and it's networking and it's this and that, it was totally alien to me. But as we got more and more involved in it, and I became more and more comfortable and aware of the industry and the power that our industry held for us to have an impact on millions of lives. I think I stepped out of my little comfort zone and realized what I had to do. So there was a courage in the unearthing of the environment, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's just about making it familiar, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So, Simon, it's a registered charity now in the UK, the US, and Australia. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and after global domination and ending world poverty on a global stage, with growing something like that, and I'm thinking even pre-COVID, not just the impacts that COVID has had, what's been the biggest challenges and the greatest learnings that you've had in that journey?
I think I've got some answers written down here, but I won't. Biggest challenges to scaling an international charity. I think, from my point of view, I sat down right at the very beginning. I came from a UN sort of experience prior to starting my own charity. So that very bureaucratic top level sort of those institutions. And then, but within the UN, I'd had the privilege and the honor to work with real grassroots charities that were having a huge impact on a very tight budget and, sleeves rolled up, passion and all the rest of it. And with SolarBuddy, I sort of came at it from both ends and looked at how we can scale by partnerships and utilising other passions and skill sets which will enable us to grow and have our impact on the back of it. So it was always the idea to partner internationally and utilise very, very motivated and passionate people that are very skilled at what they do. And that sort of enabled us to get to where we are. So I think a lot of it, as much as there's barriers to everything that you try and do, if you really step back prior to, going gung-ho and just, no holds barred, sort of let's go for it. I actually stood back and analysed the whole industry and the whole situation before I actually developed a model that could scale. And as much as there's barriers, I think the forethought and the ideation of the modelling was as important for us to get to where we are.
What do you think, if you had to nominate one thing in that ideation of the modelling, what do you think really made the difference for SolarBuddy to be able to do what it's done so far?
Engagement.
Engagement.
And the actual fact, like you said earlier, when people realise there is an issue called energy poverty and they don't know, they've never heard of it, or once they comprehend that it is a problem, what they would not have if they didn't have power, that's probably the biggest thing for us, because nobody's ever talking about it. Nobody's ever shone a light on it, and pun intended,
Well-practiced pun there, Simon.
So I think that is, that as long as we can engage with people and sort of discuss the problem with them in an engaging, sort of articulate, informative way, then we can continue to grow as we are and have the impact that we're having. And that's, we say all the time, people can ultimately describe what HIV is, AIDS is, that people can describe what a cancer is or close to, or poverty in different forms. But when you mention energy poverty, most people look at you very quizzically and what is that, and then you explain what it is and how it impacts so terribly on people. Then it creates its own momentum, and that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to, you said then about the top end, like you've seen at the UN, and then you said about the grassroots sleeves rolled up charities that were really making a difference on the ground. What is the beauty and the strength of those grassroots charities when they're making an impact that you took on board for SolarBuddy?
Oh, they're amazing. I get inspired by, and we are one of them, but we're just not necessarily on the ground in some of the countries that we donate to. But the leadership, the passion, the team spirit, the camaraderie, the willingness to go above and beyond. And it's not about, there's no egos involved generally. It's about what's right for other people and the determination to make an impact, because they've looked at the world and gone, well, it's not good enough in this situation or in this community or in this country. And we want to try and do something to change. And there's very much an element of not necessarily handouts, but leg up sort of modeling. And I'm very determined and passionate about those sorts of scenarios. And most of the grassroots charities that I've come across are very much like that. They're not there to stay. They're there to help solve and help assist and then leave, and that's really important.
I think that is really important. I think actually we can take that note from business as well. Once upon a time as a consultant, I used to win proposals because people would say to me, "You're not locking yourself in for the next 3 years." And I was like, I don't need to if I do my job. So it's also a very powerful business lesson. So if you think back over everything with SolarBuddy so far, because it's definitely only just beginning, what is your superpower? Why do you think you've been able to ignite this?
I asked my team this yesterday because I really didn't know the answer, and I'm not very good at analysing myself. And they all wonderfully came back and said courage is probably one thing that they would pin on me. I sort of lead with a can-do spirit, but still analytical, but I'm not scared of failure. I'm not scared of tripping up. I'm not scared of getting bruised and battered, and I think that instills a lot of hope and clarity and an outcome sort of driven environment for people to be a part of, I guess. So courage is what they said, and I'll take that. I'm quite happy.
Take that on board. Where do you think the wellspring for that courage is? Where is that courage originated from, or where did you say, I'm no longer willing to live without courage?
I love learning. I love learning from people. I love learning from all walks of life and seeing the world, and always have done. I've been very curious and inquisitive ever since I was a little boy. And that leads you into certain circumstances that courage may come into play. I've been in very, very dangerous situations around the world. But I think courage in business, I'm very confident in my skills, in my ability to just pick myself up and dust myself down, and if I have to, and get on with it again. And I think that once you get to a certain age or a certain level of experience, and you've done it maybe once or twice, or even 5 or 6 times, then that instills courage and resilience and all those different things. And I think I proudly sort of try and instill that in my team, that nothing's too big for us to overcome, and if you can ideate a way through it, then we can create a way through it, and we sort of work on that basis.
Fantastic. So on the flip side of courage, what's Simon Doble's kryptonite? What brings you unstuck?
I had to ask my team this as well.
And see, here's the value of a team.
And Tara, bless her heart, she nailed it, and she's very good. I have this really strong difficulty of comprehending people that don't think outside the box, and don't have critical thinking, and can't see options and ideas that are just staring them in the face, and I get really frustrated with that. And I don't know if that's a kryptonite or a personality fault of my own, but that's generally what really riles me, I guess, we have to think differently. We have to come at different problems in different ways, and have strong critical thinking. And when people are so blinkered in their mindset, and so blinkered and that's great in certain things, I get it, but when you're trying to solve problems, then I get really frustrated and have to leave the film. So
I can completely understand it. Have you learned how to navigate it any better at all as you got a little bit wiser?
Yeah, I bite my tongue a lot and let the conversation go. But yeah,
let it through to the keeper.
It's when it's from generally like people of influence and power and leadership, that I just walk away thinking, crikey, like you're so inflexible in your thinking and not able to sort of move around and try different things, and that just really frustrates me, because you don't stick to the same recipe day after day without throwing a few little bits of spices in now and then, and that's where the magic happens.
Absolutely. So when it comes to that inflexible thinking, which we all come up against, when you do come up against it and it is something or with someone or an organisation that you really need their support on board, how is it that you go about positioning yourself to be able to influence and persuade them to the point of view that you need them to get to?
I like that. So for me, I try and put them in the position in their circumstance. Happens quite often on stage. You're presenting and a question might come at you that might be ego driven, and it is what it is. And so I try and reverse the situation back from my experiences and my understanding and my work and turn it back onto them, so they can put themselves into a situation that is outside of within the realms of their knowledge and how they live, but actually outside of their comfort zone at the same time, and then take them on that journey and hopefully try and bring them to the destination that I need them to get to. And I generally do that. I don't know if I'm very good at it, but we've had a moderate sense of success, so I guess it just sort of happens. But it's very much trying to put people without taking them completely out of their comfort zone, put a notion in their mind that it could happen to them, and could end up living in a situation that isn't as comfortable or as pleasant as what they find themselves currently in. So
it's just that shift in perspective basically, first.
In a nutshell.
Yeah. In a nutshell. Bring it all together for you, Simon. So also too, you've mentioned as we opened, finding yourself in quite a dark space, and I think many of us have been there. Some of us make it through, some of us decide that it's a place to take up residence. So when it comes to making it through something, it all starts with a high impact point. And most of the world has experienced that in this last 18 months. There's a high impact event. It's something that destroys our perception or changes the game. When you are hit with something that's what I call a high impact event, what is the first thing that you do?
I've got this written down actually. To be honest with you, I remain humble. I remain gracious. I remain true to myself, and then try and step back and let my team step forward and take it forward, because we're a team. And I may have found myself fortunate through teamwork to be in the front and presenting or whatever, but it's been a lot of hard work by the team to put me into that position. And then as soon as I've maybe done my little thing and told my little story, then to remain, for me, it's massively about, it's not about me, it's not about my team, it's not about SolarBuddy, it's about the children that we work for. And the sooner I sort of move aside and let my team do what they're experts at, then the more impact we can have on children. And that's really important to me. So, I'm very lucky to meet amazing people around the world, very important, influential, successful people. But, my team would have a better relationship with most of them than I do. So.
That's clever. That's actually a really clever move on a lot of levels. What I'm hearing a lot of in the different things we've been speaking about, though, is you do create space. So whether it's actually when you were creating and you stood back and analysed the best way to get SolarBuddy's model built, you get hit with something, you actually take a step back. So would you say that creating that deliberately creating a moment of space is quite important to how you navigate?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me the other day, do I meditate? And I sort of reflected on that, and I don't meditate, but I find myself alone quite a lot in my own thoughts, and I relax by going into my head and taking that step back, that metaphorical step back, and analysing a lot of things in the directions of where things are going and conversations I've had. And I think it's really important to do that. That mindfulness about, problem solving and forward thinking and sort of planning, the ideas, what you've got to implement and guide your team with. And so, I do that. I think I've always done that. I think my teachers used to mention that when I was very young as well. So,
Yeah, it's I must admit I'm quite similar in some ways. If I don't get that breathing space where I can just sit and reflect and run everything through my head and take that figurative step back, I tend to feel overwhelmed and I tend to not make as good decisions. So I completely relate to that. But there is I feel like I have my inner circle, which is all my voices and my reflections in my head and the analysis going on. If we get back out to the outer world, who do you believe it's really important to have in that inner circle, the people surrounding you that you can count on? What are the sort of people that you have in your world for that purpose?
Lovely question. I have a very small inner circle, to be perfectly honest with you. And the inner circle that I've developed over the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years is very special to me. Up until then, I was probably surrounded by people that wanted me to be something that I wasn't, or fit into a box that I never could. So I was always bouncing against the box and trying to, probably over the last 20 years, made a few punches in that box and got out for a little bit, but then the circle around me tried to get me back in that box, and I had to cut those ties. I physically and emotionally had to cut those ties because I was generally being held back, and now I have a circle around me that lets me be me, lets me be a little bit crazy sometimes, and but supports that and embraces that, and it allows that to be innovative and creative and be myself, and that's very, very special. I am 47, so it's taken me a long time to get there, but yeah, it's so people that trust me, people that I trust, people that keep me humble, people that drive me forward, ask questions, challenge me. They're very, very important people to me, and I'm very lucky to have them.
Yeah. Courage just came up for me then again for you. You said that you realised you had to cut ties, physical, emotional, and the rest of it. What gave you, was there a particular moment when you realised that had to be done, or was it a growing awareness? How did that come about?
I think there's been stages throughout my life where it's happened, as sort of metamorphosis or whatever, but leaving England was very much that. And moving to the other side of the world after a little bit of traveling, that's pretty extreme, but I had to do it. I had to break away from those shackles and the shadows and stuff of my upbringing. But more recently, I was in business with people that wanted to box me in as just an innovator and not allow me to sort of express myself as a business leader or whatever, and those relationships came to an abrupt halt. I took the business over and took it on to another level. So,
yeah, does that clarity come from really knowing who you are?
Absolutely, now? Yeah. I'm completely aware of who I am and what my purpose is and where my position is in the world and what I can offer, and I'm very happy and at peace with all of that. So
it also sounds to me like that inner compass and that inner voice that you have and that knowledge, there's absolutely a complete level of trust in who you are internally.
Totally, 100%.
Yeah.
I challenge my team regularly. Their inner compass is my inner compass is based on my reflection in the mirror, and if I talk to myself in the morning and say, "You okay? You're doing all right," and I can keep the eyes connected, then I know I'm doing all right. But if your natural instinct is to look away, then you've got to change something, and it might only be something little, but if you don't like your reflection, then change something. And I generally, mostly, I'm happy with who I am, and I feel I'm offering the best that I can, the best version of me moving forward. So.
Yeah. So when it comes to, there's lots of headlines with SolarBuddy, you're starting to get some really great traction. And I'm going to ask this question a slightly different way. It's kind of like behind the headlines, what I normally ask is what's the achievement you're proudest of? But I'd like to put that in context of where's a moment that stands out for you in a village, with a child, with an achievement, with a project? What's something that just emotionally is that thing that you return to going, that got my heart, that got my soul, that told me this was worth it?
There's so many. There's so many goosebump moments from 2011 onwards, really. Every light that we donate to a child that I've had the privilege of being involved with has been a goosebump moment, but there's a ton of them. I think when I first did a presentation, it was in Muscat in Oman, and this was the first time we'd really, outside of the time where I didn't actually speak, this was the first time I was on stage, and there was an audience of 450 people, and they're from all over the world, and I was incredibly nervous and incredibly embarrassing, and mumbled my way through it. But afterwards, I had to, engage with the audience and stuff. And this gentleman came up to me in front of all his peers, and everyone's busy making lights and stuff. And part of the SolarBuddy project is to write little letters to your new SolarBuddy. So if you made a light now, you'd say, hey, my name's Jacqueline. My favorite, I live here, and my favorite color's this, and I studied this at school, and I hope this, that sort of stuff. Anyway, so this was the first time we'd done this in such an environment. And this gentleman came up to me, and he handed me a light, and it had a letter wrapped around it. And he said, this light I've made, and it has a letter to the child that's going to receive it, but I want you to make sure it gets to the child it needs to get to. And then he gave me another letter, and I still have this letter here. And it was a letter to me. And this gentleman had grown up in a refugee camp in the Middle East. And he worked his way out of the refugee camp, and he worked his way to, be a successful businessman. And he was in this conference, and it was a travel conference. And he said that he was that child. He said, I was talking about him when he was a little boy. And he had tears in his eyes. And I've got goosebumps just talking about it now, And,
I've got goosebumps listening to it.
That was when I knew that, okay, we can touch hearts here. We can change mindsets. We can influence decisions and influence actions. And that was when I sat back and I went back to my hotel room. I was emotionally exhausted. First time I'd done a keynote. I drank the mini fridge dry.
That's a bit of emerging speaker they don't actually disclose, that you actually need a really good minibar afterwards.
And I cried my eyes out. I literally cried my eyes out because this guy who had taken the effort and stepped out of his world and came to me and just said, hey, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. And that, from this context, it's, I think it's fairly relevant. And, but there's 1,000,001 children out there that you high five and, they run after you and, it's amazing. You just can't, I couldn't pinpoint one particular story, but that one there resonated with me deeply because it was the first time somebody that had been exposed to the SolarBuddy project and gone, keep doing it, mate.
Yeah. And also that was me. It's the first time you had a face to the people who had actually grown up in that.
That's right.
It's so powerful. We will actually put connections to everything SolarBuddy in the show notes when we put this together. So anyone who's listening who's really curious, if you haven't already Googled it while we've been talking, then the details will be in the show notes because it is an extraordinary adventure, and it's one I'm looking forward to actually joining SolarBuddy with as we move forward the next sort of 12 to 18 months. So Simon, I could talk to you forever, but I do need to wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. So I do have some rapid fire questions. Now, I have changed one of them out, and I am going to surprise you slightly with one. Sorry, but the first sentence, and this is really important to a lot of the work that I do generally, is to complete the sentence for me. And so, when I say resilience is, how would you finish that sentence?
Blimey, I've got.
Looking at the notes.
Resilience is never stopping, never giving up, never taking no for an answer, picking yourself up, dusting yourself down, courage,
Courage, yeah.
And being willing to fail, like being okay with failure and not letting that stop you. And you're not going to get it right first time. No one ever does. And there's no overnight success. That's ridiculous. So just being able to get up and keep going and putting one step in front of the other over and over and over until momentum gains. And that for me is resilience.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. When I'm talking about resilience, I always talk about you just need to find that first step. Everyone's looking for this massive bounce back. But it's one step and then the next step, and then it creates possibility in front of you. So I really love that. Thank you, Simon. I get to choose one skill or piece of knowledge to build on next for my future success. What would you tell me to pursue?
For you, I see above resilience. I think just taking that first step and being brave and I get asked all the time. I had a meeting yesterday afternoon from a guy that wants to start a business, and he's called me up and he's like, "Hey, what do I do?" And I said, "Just my father used to always teach me, and it was such a cliche, but it's so true. Plan your work and work your plan." Now, I don't necessarily write business plans, but I form them in my head. And I think, anybody that's ready to take that first step into business or social entrepreneurship or whatever it is you want to call it, is just be brave and back yourself and put your shoulders back and take it on,
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to that question I always ask, if you could be brave to be just a little bit more ambitious, what would you do? It's really important. And that ties into as well, you're saying, be brave enough to take the first step. I think it's all about, you open this conversation with, it's about personal development. Your journey is a result of the personal development journey that you've been on. And I think that's actually the knowledge that we need to build, is that self-knowledge.
Absolutely. I say all the time that the person that thinks they're the smartest person in the room certainly ain't the smartest person in the room. And so you've got, every day's a learning experience, opportunity, and you have to keep that at the forefront of how you approach every day. And I certainly do. I love learning, and I surround myself with amazingly passionate, determined, highly skilled people, but they always want to learn, and I learn from them, they learn from me, and that's how you got to. That's personal development. That's self-development. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and we can't opt out, unfortunately. Well, we can, but it's a different kind of a life. So, what's the best piece of advice you have for anyone listening about going after what it is that you really want?
Pick what you're most passionate about. I think pick your purpose or find your purpose, and then go after it with everything you got. If you're so lucky, and some people find that at a very young age, some people find it near retirement, but if you find something that you're deeply passionate about, and it's purpose driven, all the better. But if you can do that, then there's no work involved. It's again, it's a cliche, but it's so true.
It is so true.
You can keep going and going and going. And I genuinely love every day of what I do, and because it's not about making money. It's about influencing lives and illuminating futures, and there's something very special about that, which keeps me going. And I think if you can find that, and you're just starting out, and that's what you base your journey on, then you've already won. You're already winning. Good.
I love that. So the surprise question, the bonus question, is actually as a result of something you mentioned before. You said, growing up as a child, as a teenager, you didn't fit in boxes. You tried to punch your way out of boxes. I love I saw something once about don't try to be outside of the box, just smash the box, which has always been one of my favorite lines. So if you think about that younger version of Simon Doble, childhood and teens, who was your childhood hero, so to speak? Who was it that got your attention?
My parents were hugely positive influences on me. My father really understood the value of hard work and, keeping going and all the rest of it. And my mother really instilled in me the community sort of mindset, the and I was capable of anything if I really put my mind to it. And, you know, the amount of times they backed me when I was suspended from school, nearly expelled from school, not because I was just because I was trying to get out of the box, you know. And so they were probably the most influential sort of characters and people in my life growing up, because they invested in me. They believed in me. They supported, you know, and guided me to challenge the status quo and not accept the status quo. And you know, I'm probably, you know, a living, breathing example of what that can do from a young person's mind, being supported by forward-thinking parents, you know. I'm very lucky for that.
Yeah. It's a strong foundation from which to grow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the kind of foundation that many of the children that you're helping don't have.
Yeah. There's you know, I see it a lot, you know, kids that are growing up in environments where, you know, it's very structured in where they're going to work or how they're going to work, and it's, you know, it's prestigious employment and all the rest of it. And then I did one recently on the Gold Coast, and, you know, it was a careers evening, and I was there to do the one and only keynote for it, and by the end of it I had all these youngsters, 17, 18-year-old kids coming up saying, I just want to be involved in the humanitarian world now. I want to do this. Please don't go home and tell your parents that you're not a lawyer anymore. You're a humanitarian. And I'll be getting phone calls. So yeah, you know, it's for me, that's, you know, I always take my hat off to my parents. They instilled in me an ability to push the envelope. So.
Yeah, well, you've definitely been doing that, and for the very best of purposes. Simon, thank you so much for your time today. We are going to have to wrap it up there, but thank you for the generosity of your time. And as I said, we'll direct everyone towards SolarBuddy in the show notes.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been great. I've enjoyed it.